What? Oh, hi. Thought you made it safely. We ready to rock? Okay, coming in hot. I will now call to order the THPRD Board of Directors work session for November 13th, 2024. Jessica, could you please call roll?
Harvey Minor,
Here.
Alfredo Moreno,
Here.
Lisa Monteblanco.
Here. All right, welcome. Good evening. I think we are starting with Art in Parks, so I should take it away. And Tia will be here, Jessica. She's just running a few minutes late.
All right. Good evening, everyone. I am here to talk to you about something that we brought to you, I think, in December of last year. And so we got great feedback from you during that meeting, and we've come back and sort of thought through where we think we might be. We wanted to give you some representative examples of what we'd be talking about, and take back any feedback you want to offer us. So first, I wanted to share with you that we've got this map that shows where we have art across the district currently, and the different colors and shapes identify murals in the purple squares. We have installations of some nature in the orange triangle, sculpture in the green triangle, paintings in the blue squares, and other are also listed here. So those could be any number of little things that we've got out in our site, so don't fall neatly into those categories. So we do, and I don't think we had this map for you when we talked to you last, but we did want to share that we do have art in the parks, and it's come to us through a variety of ways. You've seen your talking walls, and some of these things have been developed more recently, but we did have, as a part of a grant-funded project years and years ago, some interpretive art installations, and so that was sort of brand new when I started at the district, and we've added pieces over time. So I have some images to share with you. So as I mentioned, we have a bunch of different things going on here. And so I think the picture here on the left of the screen is an installation along our Fano Creek Trail near a pump station. And there was a lot of impact to our trail as the pump station work was underway. And so as part of our compensation for allowing all that activity to take place, this art installation was installed along the trail to give folks a little something to look at. It kind of evokes water flow, and it's right there on Fano Creek Greenway Trail. The image in the middle is, and the image on the right are both nature revealed grant funded projects that have been in the district for many, many years. I love the name of the one on the right, Mossuments. Oh, so good. So those are a couple of things that we have going on. Something that we would like to explore that isn't a big thing right now is art both inside and outside of buildings. And so these are not current, these are not ours, but I wanted to give you some images of what that could look like. And, you know, the whole idea that we have about art is really about injecting fun and whimsy and things to think about and to spark conversation and creativity. And so this image on the left is actually in a hotel lobby, and they have this character and her dog that are just sitting there. And I just thought, how could you get more fun than that, where you've got this sitting on a bench in your park, and you've got this. And it kind of reminded me of a recent art installation you might have heard about around town. That was the cat, the Leica Studio cats that were all over downtown Portland. And so this kind of reminds me of that, and thought that was kind of fun. The image in the middle here is at the Lake Oswego maintenance, the Public Works building, the Public Works building. And a bunch of us were given a tour recently by their park superintendent to show us their building. We were just curious about how things laid out in that space. And they had a 1% art requirement when they redid this building. And I just thought this was a neat thing to do. They took a variety of tools and etched them and carved them, laser cut them, and those became art on the wall. And then the picture on the right, yes, it's a bathroom, but who says bathrooms can't be fun and whimsical as well? This one is at the newly remodeled Portland building downtown. And what I liked about this was you walk in and it's a very utilitarian space, but along the wall, they have all these images of Portland, all sorts of fun images around. And so these are all very different approaches to things that could be considered art, but all enhance a space and give you something to talk about. Here again, we have that installation along the Fano Creek Trail, and we have another one of those nature revealed installations. And I think this one was along the Rock Creek Greenway Trail, and it has since been moved to our warehouse, and that is a story that we want to come back to. That is no longer there, but it's an important life cycle element of art that we need to think about and talk about. But this interpretive art typically comes along with some signage explaining what it means, what it's meant to evoke. And so it's not necessarily just art for art's sake. There's something interpretive about it as well. Also, we kind of thought about this category that was artistic amenities and things that could also provide something that you might want to see in a park. And so we thought about this category of uses because something we never had previously considered as art was this image on the right, which is a fish-shaped bicycle rack. This is ours. We do own this, and this exists at the Denny Road trailhead for the Fano Creek Greenway Trail. And we just sort of considered it an amenity. But if you think about like finding ways to make our parks unique, we've got 117, really 120, but you have to wait for next year's fact sheet for that to be the official number. When you think about all those different parks, what sets them apart? What makes them unique? What makes us unique as an organization? And I think art is one way that can help us do that. That we create these spaces and we celebrate different things, and we know that we have things. We want to have benches in our parks, and we want to have, in the middle, that's a utility box on a street corner in Boise, Idaho, but they have made it into something interpretive, and they've provided this wayfinding. And so there's ways that you can make things more fun, more useful, and we want to look at that as an aspect of art within parks as well. And of course, you're very familiar with our talking walls and murals, and these, if I let her, and please don't ask her, but she'll go on. Holly will talk for hours and hours about talking walls because they're amazing, but they have a lot of benefits, and there's some really neat things that come along with this. And it's not just the community activation that can come, or the communication and the co-production of doing these activities with different groups and artists, but it's also a way to take something that might be getting some unwanted attention in the way of really hideous graffiti, and maybe giving it a different look so that people celebrate what you see and don't try to just fill that blank wall with some kind of paint. And we've definitely seen that all over the place. It's really a bummer. And so that's one really cool benefit of something like a talking wall or a mural, to activate a space, to give it a life that people aren't trying to fill otherwise. So, and then I really like this sort of category, and this is an area that we'd like to explore, and we have done. So these are images within parks we maintain. That frog is up at Pioneer Park near the HMT complex. And these are different things that, depending on the age range of the child, these are meant for more of the younger set, but you can climb all over these things. Take cute pictures of your kids and your nephews and nieces out on these installations. And so there's a fun kind of Instagrammable moment that you can have out in the space with this. And you can look at doing this a little bit differently. And we brought to you a park concept plan for an area up in North Bethany that had something similar, that was kind of the step beyond the little kids climbing, but it was rock installations and things that you could get up on. And so you can kind of gauge this for a different age range that you might want to engage in the space. And then I also wanted to note the gateway and showcase art. And something that we heard from you when we talked about this previously was, we prompted the conversation around, do we want to look at something like a 1% for art, which is taking a look at the construction budget, the hard cost budget of a project, and pegging 1% from that number to develop some sort of art for that project. And the picture on the left is an example of that. This is an art installation outside of our aquatic center at the HMT complex, and this was done as part of the 2008 bond. And so we did put a percentage toward art for this site and did this interpretation, and we did a whole artist selection process, and this was completed as part of the ADA parking improvements at HMT. And then on the right side of the screen, you see a piece of art that we contributed to that's located outside of the Patricia Reeser Performing Arts Center. And so the conversation about the 1%, what I took away from that was there was a concern that, you know, the smaller the site, and we do have areas of the district where we're developing fairly small sites, that that 1% wouldn't calculate to be that many dollars. But the location of that space might really benefit from having a show-stopping sort of art piece. And so there was maybe an interest in not necessarily tying it to that budget number. And so what we kind of pulled away from that and wanted to hear your thoughts about was really forming a strategy versus a policy that allows us the flexibility to take a look at sites as we develop them and say, is this an opportunity for a gateway art piece? Is this a place where we should look at, you know, what would the budget be for 1% to do art in a building? Could we do inside and outside art? But we would develop this strategy that enables us to ask the questions, particularly as we move through an internal design process. You know that we establish these teams before we move forward on any project, and we start asking these questions. So the strategy would be in our functional plans to prompt the questions, to have folks think about what type of approach makes the most sense here. Is it a neighborhood park where we really want to incorporate that climbable play or those artistic amenities? Is it a big community park where we can do something much bigger? Many more people are going to be able to see this and interact with it. And so it would really establish that where, when, and what type of art we would incorporate into sites. But it would remain flexible so that we can look at these different options. So as I said, this is where we would locate this, is in those functional plans, which we're in the process of updating right now. And we thought about one concept that we wanted your feedback on, and it was sort of a forward-looking and backward-looking approach. It is very easy for us to ask these questions of the new parks that are coming online, and as we're building budgets, incorporating dollars in the budget for these artistic elements. And so we would absolutely suggest that we move in that direction. Going back and looking at parks that are already established, we think has a great opportunity to do some things too. And potentially we could look for grants or other opportunities to do activations. Maybe they're great low cost but big impact sort of things like talking walls. So we wanted to be able to not just think about how we incorporate art into the future parks, but also have a strategy for incorporating and taking advantage of opportunities for our existing sites. So some of the things that we would recommend including in that strategy are how we might go about selection of artists when we do these different installations, the longevity and the care of art. We had a conversation recently around memorial benches. And if we were going to have someone put in a memorial bench and it was damaged by a tree falling on it or heavily vandalized or something, somebody has provided us funding to put something in, and we wanted to say if something were to happen to this bench within this period of time, we'll replace it because they've made that investment. And so we'd commit to something like that. But if it's been there for 10 years and that happens, maybe in that case, we would not be replacing it. So we need to have some parameters around what happens if something is damaged. Are we clear on what it's going to take care of something? Unfortunately, we do get a lot of graffiti. So how are we going to ensure that we can remove that graffiti from whatever this surface is without damaging the art? So those kinds of considerations we'd want to include. And then finally, the decommissioning of art. The installation over at Rock Creek Park that now resides within our warehouse was because it was no longer able to be located where it was. And it's not something we want to hold on to. It's something we need to probably talk to the artist and find out, is this something you want to take back? Is there some way for us to incorporate this in a different way? Would the artist have an issue with that? And so we wanted to have some guidance in these functional plans about what we would do in the event that we have to decommission art. So again, this is sort of the strategy that we would propose to incorporate into those functional plans to get more fun and exciting pieces of art in our district. So I'll pause because I had a couple of questions, and it was, does this meet your needs? Your interest in incorporating art is what we've suggested, addressing your concerns and thoughts. Do you like both the forward-looking and the backward-looking approach? And is there anything we missed and that we should be thinking about as we more fully develop this strategy?
Jump in first. I don't know.
This is great. Love it. Super exciting. I think as you're presenting, I'm thinking about like all my favorite art pieces in the district. And at first I was like, not in the bathroom. No, but you got me thinking. Okay. And I also will call out, I feel like so many of our neighbors do this work well too. Like I love the city of Beaverton's with their decorated trash cans. That was so stinking cute. I don't know if you've been to Klamath Falls lately, but they, on their utility boxes, it's birds, and a different like regional bird, and like they say what bird it is. It is adorable because you're walking down the main street and you get to learn about birds. So I think so many of these things, like it doesn't have to be a giant statue, right? That costs a small fortune, which it should, because we should pay artists, to be clear. I love how like broad we're thinking about art, because I think you're spot on around that that fish that is also bike storage. But let's see, I want to answer your questions. Art strategy. Yes. A few things that are coming up for me is I love how you're thinking about like inside, like we have so much space and so much wall space. And I also wonder like, how can we partner like with the Beaverton's Art Council? I don't know if Washington County has an art council. That's a lesson for me to learn. But I feel like there's people with expertise and stuff, and then there's us with wall space. And I know our staff are really busy, so how can we like then those work together? I appreciate the forward-looking and backward-looking approach. I think I'm thinking a lot about our, the picture that you showed actually like really highlighted that our art is pretty dispersed, which is great. And we know our parks aren't as ideally not disparate, but we have pockets, right, that need to be addressed. So part of me says like, let's give more art to those pockets. I also think there's an opportunity here in our commitment to working with minority and women-owned businesses and doing that with art, and even like maybe it's extra points for when it's a artist of color when we're like looking at the selection process. I think that's it. Thank you.
I can jump. Yes, I think the work is essential. So I fully endorse it being added to functional plans. Yeah, forward, backward, yes, indeed. So I think there's a way to, I think in parks that are in maybe important areas or areas where I don't know, I'm trying to think of how to articulate this. I think it's a way to breathe in life to maybe parks that aren't, I don't know, they aren't highly utilized with their current structures. I keep thinking of the Fifth Street Park off Allen Boulevard as one. It's like, I see it driving, everyone sees it driving. There's not much to it. It's in a distinct neighborhood. I could just, even if the swings and the little slides stay the same, it's in such a unique place. I can see an art piece there reflecting the community around it to be very important and impactful. So I think the goal of art that A, reflects a community around it, and B, the piece you showed of inside the facility, the hotel, is a great way for THPRD to reflect its own values and feelings. That piece, sparks joy. It gives you a feeling when you see it, a feeling we want people to have when they come in. So in that case, we're kind of setting the tone, and I think there's opportunities especially in neighborhoods where our parks aren't carved out of the neighborhood. They're part of the neighborhood for us to reflect the community around it. So yes, I love that. I think looking backward in particular, I see an opportunity to breathe life in a way that could be impactful without having to redo all the equipment if the equipment is still viable and things like that. So I think interpretive signage is key. Some of those I've jogged past that piece on the Fano Creek, the little the rusted colored one, and I have had the thought, oh, that's random. And so I would love to and if there is a little sign explaining what it is, I haven't seen it. So I would love for less, oh, that's random, and at least have something that somebody, if they're paying attention, could see, or maybe could go to a website and be like, oh, there's a piece of art here. I'll go to all these different parks if I'm crazy enough to visit them all. But I think ultimately that would be great to have those be little anchors that people want to go seek out. And so having that signage that explains this piece was developed by so-and-so, reflects XYZ, is really big as well.
I will share, just sorry to interrupt, that there's a whole nother section on interpretive signage. I just wanted to stop for a moment and get some feedback. So yes,
Yeah.
please, I will write all those things down again when we get to that section. Thank you.
Good boss.
Miles, Tia, comments?
Yes. So love the indoor and outdoor stuff. When I think about like values for specifically the way that our district operates, I think about the values of play and recreation, and I think about like the interaction and education opportunities that we have. And thinking about the longevity piece, I really love the idea of more play structures that convey an interaction for young people. And I think that there are some cool ways that we can make those pieces sturdy, I guess, is a good way to think about it. But like having a park that feels alive in its own sense, I think a little bit about a park in my hometown. The Midwinville Aquatic Center, outside of it is this big park that there's like a dragon on it and stuff. And like I remember as a kid, like spending my time at that park all the time, and absolutely loved it. And I think parks that kind of like have that built into it, where it feels almost alive, is like a really beautiful way to work art into a space that is so centered in recreation and the values of our district. 100% agree about looking forward as well as looking back. Being able to get all of our different spaces within the district to have some sort of integration of art, and I think that can be really empowering for people who are just like experiencing the recreation in their community. There was something that I wrote down and I'm trying. Oh, so my thought on this was because of the way that Alfredo was talking about it. It would be really cool to do like an art walk, but like a video of it, and have it on our website, which just showcases all of these different spaces and just like gives you an opportunity to see what is offered, especially the ones that are interactive. Something that is just really accessible for people to know what is in their community. Because someone who lives in like North Bethany may not be visiting another part of the district, but there are really cool spots that they could be out recreating and experiencing parts of the art and beauty of our parks. I know that doesn't totally answer all of your questions, but I mean, basically, yes. Good job.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll go. I like the strategy more than the 1% policy procedure stuff, because I think we have a lot that we need to make up for that we haven't done because it was in a focus prior. I love that we're focusing on it now. I know you didn't ask for examples or other things, but yeah, so like as Miles was saying, the interactive like playgrounds, like our dinosaur park that we have in North Bethany or Springville or whatever, great if it was included as part of it, right? Like it's a very small thing and it's wonderful, but you can only stay there for so long because it's like it's like the dinosaur. And then the real park is like, you have to walk to it like a couple blocks down. But if something like that, like my kids know dinosaur park, and like even when we go to Hawaii, there is a dragon park. Like if we could have a dragon somewhere, every kid loves dragons. And there's always a dragon park, So there's like just this long dragon that people climb on and off of. So that's when you said that, I thought it was funny because my kids always ask to go to dragon park also. But that's how they like relate. They find something that they love and stuff. So any kind of art, if we can stress being interactive, tactile, climbing, those kinds of things, I really enjoy that. There's an idea of like story walks that makes hikes interesting where you can read parts of stories. So it encourages people to continue on, and like having in Cooper Mountain, those certain little points where, you can look through the things or do that sound thing. But for adults would love to walk through natures, but kids kind of need something to look forward to and a checkpoint to make it out to. So during those long hikes and stuff, or all of our trails that we focus on, if we have certain checkpoints, then the kids can have a reference to of like, we're going to, usually it's like, we're going to Pirate Park. And then it's like, well, where do we go next? Well, we'll try to go here next. Like it gives them a sense of distance also. So if we can put that as part of our strategy, that would be great. That memorial bench picture, I don't know if the foundation is someone to be good to just have those and know that I actually saw that one at this amazing park in Bellevue, Washington when we were up there. So I took a picture of that. But yeah, so it's like, it's that in the upper sign is like the memorial of who it was. And I just think it was so nice that you could just sit at something that somebody provided, and swinging benches is always funner than like a wooden one with somebody's plaque on it, So, and they had like maybe 6 of them in this one beautiful community park. So it was just really nice. So I don't know if that's something the foundation wants to come, where we can just present something like this is what it is and what you can purchase, since it sounds like hopefully we'll be doing more memorial things around the park. That would be great. The other idea I had was like Parks Passport, like something that every park has, as far as like if we're starting to do signage and stuff like that, where they can just like use a chalk or a pencil to put it in their little passport book. And maybe once they've gone to 20 parks or something, they can turn it in, the kids can turn it in to some, but it encourages people to not just stay in their own neighborhood park and to just see all the different things, which is what I imagine our district to have, is to have parks that you would want to travel to and not just stick into your neighborhood for. As far as the question, the only thing that I wanted to know a little bit more about was, how do we decide, because I know we gave a good chunk of money to that Patricia Reeser art thing, which is what exactly is our policy with like working with other groups to, do that's outside of our district to contribute to those kinds of art things? Because I don't know if I can say this, but I was a little bit disappointed that wasn't as interactive. It's just kind of something that you see. And so I felt like it wasn't to the values of Parks and Rec per se. And I know we weren't designing the whole thing or anything, but how we give or who we give our money and how we pick to work with those things, I would like to know more information of. And I don't know if you can comment on that now, or if we do that a lot, or if that was just like a one-time special case.
That was uniquely at one time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, if that's not a thing that we normally do, then I don't think we need to dwell on it. But
Go.
Clarification point. I just want to make sure that I articulated what I meant on number 1. I am totally for an allocation of funds that we spend towards future and past parks. I'm also very much for designation of art and parks being an art in itself, that staff can figure out where the best places to, as opposed to you must spend X on your space. So I think there's going to need to be some wiggle room on where the best opportunities for impact are. So just want to make sure, and all my blathering about interpretive signage.
oh yeah, I have one more thing. For the rec centers, if the kid, like at school, the kids are always, like every art project, they put it on the walls and that's like what fills your hallways, and it's constantly changing. If we have like something like that at the rec centers, because I know we have like lots of pictures and stuff like that, but if a kid can walk down the hall and see like what they made, that's like great for them to keep wanting to come back to these classes. And it's helpful for like a parent to be like, oh, do you want to make this like clay project or, you know, things so that a parent knows when you sign up for this class, these are the kinds of things that will come out, not just like glitter splashed on a page, which is also an option.
It's true.
But but you know, like for those other arts or for like teens and stuff, if they can display their art, and then other teens will be like, wow, I can maybe like this is the type of art I'm trying to do, so I should sign up for this class, like painting 101 or whatever. So or adults and those kinds of things, or at LC Stir, I'm sure they would like to like see their own art. And stuff.
They have a long history of using their art on the walls.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If we can do that more at like the rec centers, I think that would be great too.
Thank you.
I'm going to try to bring it home and just offer my, I agree with everything that has been shared. I think overarching what I'm hearing is a strategy provides more flexibility for us to take into consideration all of the nuances as we go to build versus a policy that is so locked in and prescriptive. So I am pro this when we're talking about something that is truly subjective. What is art, right? You could say that is just, could mean any of the different things. So yes, pro strategy versus a set policy. I think agree that looking forwards and backwards makes sense. There, you know better, you do better. I think the way in which we're using community feedback and engagement and the parks that have yet to be built and where in the future, right, have so many more, I think, textures and voices and nuances represented than perhaps, again, some of our parks from the past. And I think what a accessible, easy way in some ways to, I'm going to use words that have been used here already, to bring life, whether that's a talking wall or again, some interactive feature that I think when we're looking and needing to do replacement, it could be form and function at the same time. And I think the fish bike rack is a great example. That again, there's durability, to use this word, there's longevity there, but there's also function. And so I think there's such a happy balance there of being able to do both. I don't know what all you're going to say on interpretive signage and whatnot, but I will just be overt and say what I hear when I hear that is education, and that I think art is such a wonderful way into learning. And so whether that is, again, through interpretive signage and placemaking, that we get to have an opportunity to teach and to learn. And that can be done in such a passive way. And so I just want to make sure that we're staying connected in some way to that educational piece of the why. I think, Alfredo, you might have mentioned it as like the random, huh? And so just, I don't know what's coming. So that's not to say that we don't already do a fantastic job of that. But I think in terms of prioritization, the why and that moment matters. Yeah, should we focus our work in another direction? I don't think so. I think this is spot on. And I think the first time it was presented to us, we all jumped because I think there's, as you can hear, there's synergy and excitement around it. And we immediately were like, what are our favorite pieces and how can we start to like get really into the weeds? And I appreciate that you've kind of redirected this in order to kind of demonstrate the different types and what we mean when we say art. And it doesn't necessarily just mean a show-stopping piece. It could literally mean birds on a electrical box. So yeah.
Thank you.
Sorry, I have one more thing. For our, if we were to create, if the memorial stuff is something that could potentially be like a consistent thing, or you know, a good opportunity for our community members and stuff, like if we had a catalog of art and stuff as we start to like research different things that maybe people can pick out, and somebody could like put this in, like John Smith was, you know, here and dedicated the wheels to keep the community, you know, turning or something like that. Like, I'm just looking at this, but I think that would be like a unique opportunity also for people to get memorialized and beautify their art and be a part of the parks that they loved and enjoyed. So that's another, just popped into my head.
Great. All right, I'll move quickly through this next section. And yes, this was art and parks, but we figured we should talk interpretation as well, because these are an element of art within parks as well. I'm starting here with some of our existing interpretive art, and this is also along our Fano Creek Trail near the 92nd Avenue roundabout that a few of you got to christen this summer. But this is intended to tell that story. And I think if we were to maybe look at some best practices for interpretive signage, it might say do things a little bit different. There's a lot of really good feedback out there about, how many colors and how many fonts and how much you try to cram on. Everybody's got some element of this story that they feel so connected to. And so we've shared a lot of information on this. And I think that there are opportunities for us to maybe take this in a new direction if we were to really pursue doing this, which sounds like you are supportive. But interpretive signage can look differently. I was telling a couple of my colleagues that I spend a lot of time on trips taking pictures of signs. They're from my own curated collection. This one on the left is from Lake County in Illinois, and they were trying to tell a story about the people that had inhabited this land of theirs from time immemorial. And the image on the right is an incredibly difficult to read sign at the site of a former ghetto wall in Warsaw, Poland. So there's examples of things that are translating really well and that are really kind of difficult to read unless you're avoiding all the glare coming from different angles. And so those are sort of things that we would want to think about as we're installing signage. Here are some other examples, and you can interpret anything, as I found out. Over here on the left, it's a story about rerouting water, and people get excited about these sorts of things. On the right, this was in the Indiana Dunes National Park, where they had the parade of homes, the Century of Progress homes. And so I was like, why is this building, why is it so hideous? Why is it shaped like that? And so I got to read about it right there. But here's just more examples of that interpretive signage. And, you have all these different techniques and ways that they go in. This sign on the right was kind of, peeling along the backs. The one on the left presumably was newer, but also was made of incredibly durable material that felt like it had some sort of treatment for anti-graffiti. And so there's interesting things that we could do with materials to make sure that these are really durable and that you don't put a sign up and it explains what that thing is for a year and then it's falling to pieces. And so similar to what we talked about with art is that we really do want to take a more flexible approach with the interpretive signage and based on what kind of story we want to tell. One of the things we talked about was we could look at this from so many different angles. We could tell the story of the people who lived here from centuries ago. We could talk about particular historic or cultural or natural special elements that we think are worthy of explanation. If there was a big property donor, we've talked about a recent park opening and how that came into our hands and what that family meant to the greater Beaverton area. And so we could tell a donor situation. We could talk about what was really unique about how this park even came to life. And that's also a story of La Raíz. So we think about that and we think about, maybe there was something that was really particular about how something came to be a park. And so it could have been just about the people that rallied around it. And so we think that there can be multiple different ways to tell a story and how you tell that could look a little bit differently. So one of the questions I have for you on the next slide is about consistency and approach, because that might not work so well. And then an idea that we had was that we are putting up park kiosk signs in most parks that we build. And that would be an opportunity for us to maybe take a draft of what the interpretive sign could look like and post it, get some feedback, because we have found, particularly with naming, that we've suggested a name, we've shared it with the community, and they're like, oh, no, that's not quite right. You need to spell it this way or with this accent. And so it'd be an opportunity to get some feedback. It wouldn't necessarily go in right at the front end. We draw people in, gather their feedback, and then make that more formal choice with the signage a little bit later. So moving on to the last slide, and the questions for you is, there are agencies that do have standards and say, this is what our interpretive signs look like. And they use these fonts and they use these colors. And I kind of love it. I mean, Holly knows I've talked so much about a style guide and loving having that guidance, but I don't know that it lends itself necessarily to these site-specific places where we're trying to tell potentially really different stories. And so the question there is, do we do a standard or do we look more to customize it to the setting? And then for that list of things that we would deem worthy of interpretation, are there ones that we missed and things that you would like us to contemplate? Again, this would be talked about at a prep meeting, the internal design teams and through the process of developing the concept plan. So any guidance you give us would go into that document to guide our conversations about it.
If I could add too, even though we theoretically have executive session shortly here, and we still have one presentation to go, we're not going to need much time in executive session. We protected time, but I think 20 minutes is all we're going to need. So,
Thank you, Doug.
Yep.
Team.
I love it. I will jump. I love it. I will say the thing that maybe is missing is potentially, like, if you have this sign, if you have a lower sign, when we can have lower signs for little ones so that adults can do things and read what, or kids, and then little kids can also read whatever or interact with things. I think that would be really fun. If that's something that we think about and incorporate. The other thing is, I show at the zoo, the interactive one where you put the key in and it makes a sound or tells a story. Like, all kids love that. And so I don't know how expensive those are, but if we have stories to tell, that's just like a different type of interpretive signage, which I think would be really good. And kids would love to like press buttons or, insert a key or something like that. And then have that interpretive signage be through sound instead of just visual. So just thinking about the different sensories and stuff, and or like, I don't know how often we use Braille and stuff like that, or feelings and things like that for other kids and stuff like that. So that's the only thing that I think is missing from the pictures that we've seen so far.
Yeah.
Back on that. I was just going to add, in our commitment to accessibility. So in my experience, my understanding is like white font, sans serif, dark background is the best. So I would love to see something like that that's standard.
Okay.
I'm all for like a strong brand, and I would love it if it's like, yeah, that's a THPRD sign and it was super clear no matter where you were. But if that's not strategic, then I am not the brand expert here. And then, I appreciate what was mentioned there about maybe highlighting like property donors. It also made me think, if we were to do that, could we also spend the same level of energy highlighting a community member that maybe could never donate property? I was just thinking about all the thoughtfulness that went into the park naming and how it was, not everyone gets a road named after them, right? And everyone has, so many people have made such powerful impacts on their community, right? So I would love if we were like, yes, we are absolutely going to highlight this family who gave us something so generous and that for generations is going to give us access to something we never had. And how do we lift up another family or a community member or a small company who, donates to the Christmas baskets every year? So that's just something that's on my mind. But I love that we're doing this, and yeah, it's great.
I'll hop in here. For branding sakes, I do like having a district standard. I think it would be really nice to have something that could look uniform across the district. I do want it to be something that is like engaging and bright and fun. With that being said, like, I do think that there should be some wiggle room, especially for culturally significant spaces and pieces. Just to make sure that we're doing our best to represent, even in our signage, how that community should, I think, desire to be represented in that space specifically. then I got excited about the key things. I was literally thinking about that, and I wrote, "All kids love it," and Miles. I would also want that for myself. I just think it's like a really fun, unique way to like interact with art. Is just like being engaged in another like medium and having something that is. It's kind of like the passport idea that was thrown out too, and it's engaging, it's interacting, it's. I don't know,
And if people can't read, if you have a button that you can push, so you're still enjoying the signage and you can tell by the pictures, but that helps with, yeah, that.
I can read, but I do agree. But yes, I think it. Cool idea.
I'm gonna go down this list real quick. So, yeah, I think a best practice is good. I wouldn't go so far as to say a just absolute standard for interpretive signage. I like a museum exhibition or something like that. I want to give enough wiggle room to, I want placemaking stories and memorable creative to be the end goal for these. So whatever achieves that, depending on the park and the concept of each one. I don't necessarily want clinical. What we have now is very good, solid clinical signs that say THPRD, and we can see them and they're great. Let's have the logo be that anchor, but I think kind of I will, my preference, and we're all different because it's art, would be that you have some wiggle room to do something interesting that kind of deepens the sense of place and the story that you're trying to tell. So yeah, how you do that, and I mean, that's the more complexity you have, the more harder it is to, okay, well, is this, have we centered folks with, vision impairment and things like, I mean, that adds complexity. It's a lot easier just to standard, this hits that box, it's in this font, everything across the board. So I'm not helping you there in terms of that. But I think at the end of the day, I would think this is about people feeling like it adds to the specialness of a place. So as for basis of interpretation, I think you had a great list. I would just kind of add when appropriate if there's like surrounding immediate neighborhood story worth telling there, that because the park is so symbiotic with that neighborhood, great. I think that's good. So one thing I would just add, I think there's, and yes, I'm a former board member for the Five Oaks Museum, but Tigers Heritage Trail is a great example of contracting with another organization to help tell the story. Stories of people that is just not in the wheelhouse of a city or a government agency to know all these things. So I don't know all the details of the cost, and I know some of those signs are falling apart, but simple visual meets paragraph of interpretation done by another agency and approved by the government agency seemed like an awesome way to kind of deepen the placemaking of that long half-mile long trail of whatever it is there, the Heritage Trail and Tiger. So just options to work with other folks to help as needed. So that was it for me.
Thank you. I'm a little on both. I'm going to jump on Alfredo's train a little bit here of terms of, yes, a standard is good, but I agree that I think having some flexibility to understand, I mean, even just the examples that you've provided for us tonight visually, what that can look like. The pieces are so different and where the signage would go can be so different. And so I think allowing for that flexibility makes sense. At the same time, when I see best management practices, I almost think it's less prescriptive around a style guide per se and more around what are we needing this and asking the signage to do. And if what we're asking that signage to do is to be accessible for all, and that then brings in some of the other elements that come to mind in terms of, again, language, ability, access. So I would lean a little bit more to having practices around ensuring that we're not doing a sign just for a sign's sake. What are we asking the sign to do? And how can we best arrive at that? What does that look like? Which I think is a little bit different of an approach than just saying, again, it's a certain, again, to a brand standard that says, this is your headline, this is your tagline, this is the lockup, and you have to just keep it fixed there. That is hard to then answer about should signage be customized, because I think what you're hearing me say is I think you do need to take into account what is the piece and where is this going. And so that does lead me down a path that says I don't think we need to start every single time with something new, but there could be templates that are available that indicate, again, which one of the bases are we using? Is this a story about the patron who was able to donate the land? And maybe there's a template that says if it's this kind of a piece, we're going in this way, and you've got like your mood board. Whereas if this is placemaking, that it needs to check off X, Y, and Z boxes. I think they're just different objectives for why we need a sign. And I don't necessarily think that we're missing anything. I would just underscore that, again, I think education comes in here. So just being very intentional around looking at the larger picture and the story that we're trying to tell in the moment that we have to engage. And is that moment to engage for fun? And it's a key, and you get to enjoy. Is it fun and we need to honor the history of this site? And so just being just underscoring the intention.
Because we're talking about standards, I feel like, well, so it sounds like we have both sides, I guess. I now that I've heard everything that I was talking about, I actually would prefer not to have as much of a standard, because I feel like we're still new to learning what we can do with our interpretive signs. And I feel like it's going to be an evolution process for us. And as we open more parks with different signs and see the interaction, or if we try like a sound one, or, you know, those kinds of things, I would love to that staff has the ability to go and try new things and different things and stuff like that. That said, like things that are like wayfinding or marking our trails or this many miles, like those kinds of things I definitely get could be like needs to be standard, because you're trying to get from one place all the way through the district. Like, so if our trails and stuff all have, you know, this is how you get there, then that's something that you need to look for. And that in itself, branding and standardization, I get, because it leads you to a second place that leads you to another place and so forth. But if it's a sign specifically for one set of area where it doesn't need to be continuous throughout something, then I feel like everybody should have the flexibility depending on the site to create and go wild with these signs.
I totally understand what you're saying. And good news there is we recently won a grant to do signage for the Intertwine, which is a coordinated display, and we can replace signs all along some regional trails. So that's pretty great. Well, thank you. I know that took a little bit longer, but I really do appreciate all the feedback, and we'll just continue to bring you more information as it develops.
Thank you, Misha. Appreciate it.
Art has no timeline.
Yes, exactly.
Wow.
And we can take the full 30 minutes here. Feel free. You're not gonna, whatever you need.
I don't think that though, because we don't really, thank you though.
Take it away, Holly.
All right, hello, Holly Thompson, your communications director. I'm so sorry that we're talking about elections again so soon. I know you all thought you were done. But I want to say it's actually a great time. Like, I gotta complete, is this the right time to be talking? Yes, it's absolutely the right time to be talking. And the reason is because we just went through an election for the district in May. We still got that muscle memory. We've still got that experience. Some thoughts are still kicking around in there. And the purpose of today's work session is to both look backward and look forward, right? We want to talk about what does the process look like? What are our roles and responsibilities? What do we as staff do to prepare for elections? What should board members be thinking about their role and responsibilities? Our roles are very different in this endeavor. And so what a great opportunity to talk about what did we learn, what successes do we want to celebrate, and maybe what are some things we want to change as we look to the future, because we've got time to take those lessons learned and apply them going forward. So you have, I went really low tech, you have a sheet of paper and it was on top of the proclamation. And my intent was to please jot down notes, right? And those two questions really transparently, I'm going to talk and yak for a short little amount. And then I really want to turn it over to y'all to have a discussion around these two questions. And I never do this, but I'm going to ask permission for you to indulge me because I, as kind of the project manager for it, would like to answer those same questions as well to kick off the discussion, offering staff perspective. So to begin with, we're going to start with attachment 1. And it is just kind of an overview of what it takes for an organization to get ready for a future levy or bond measure. I am not, I'm going to pull these out for a second. I'm not going to go through in detail the other things that were in your packet, but I just want to reference the handy dandy restrictions on political advocacy by public employees, right? This is the law. This is what I have to know inside and out to make sure that I am respecting Oregon state law and doing the job correctly to run an information campaign only, because as a public employee, I cannot advocate for measures. I have to inform, and that's a responsibility that staff have to carry very seriously. There's also a quick reference guide. So if you're like me and you're like, oh, I can't get through 18 pages, this is the quick one. And then I just wanted to show you an example of what we do at THPRD. So we THPRD-ize it and kind of really simply try to do yes, no for employees and cut this information down even shorter. So we'll set those aside, but they're there for reference. This is the document I want to focus on, attachment 1. And the message here is, if you're thinking about having an election, you better start 2 years, 26 months minimum beforehand, right? The work begins way in advance. And I call phase 1 preparing for a future levy or bond measure. And you can see there's a lot of tasks there, but they're all centered at the staff area. And that's because we need to do a lot of homework. We got to make the case, we got to study. If it's an operational levy, we've got a lot of homework to do to get our math right, to do our projections. Jared's talking to bond counsel. We're getting a range of like what numbers could look like, because that's kind of the beginning homework to begin to draw the picture, to even put a concept together, to come to the board and start work. So for now, right, we passed a bond measure in 2008. Looking to the future, we know that we will have the opportunity to consider whether we need to replace that bond measure. And that takes a lot of pre-planning, pre-working. The work staff are doing right now to update those functional plans, to get everything in order so that we are ready to go. After about 8 months, we move into phase 2. This is developing a more specific plan. So we've got the initial homework done. We've got a bit of a landing zone. And now we want to start to have more public discussions. If you'll go with me, you'll remember this is going to be about March, April 2023. Remember, we started having board discussions around what a levy could look like, what that process could look like. Why is there a need? What's the business case for it? We're asking the board kind of initial questions. We're looking to you for guidance from your perspective. What things should we be considering in whatever package we're asking the voters to consider? We're looking to the community for advice as well as we're putting a concept together. For us, with the measure we passed in May, that was our levy task force, right? So what were those tasks that the board took? You participated in those initial discussions. You got on board to say, yes, we should explore this. You had the consideration to say, let's form a task force. We talked about, what that task force should look like. You got to appoint the members of the task force. All of that work is happening. And that takes about 8 to 12 months to go through those process steps. This is always a little bit of a stressor for me because there's always a lot of pressure of, we've got to get out there, we've got to talk to the public. We've got to get out there, we've got to talk to the public. But remember, the board hasn't taken action until the end of this phase, right? And so what do I mean by that? There's always a sort of challenge of you're talking to the public about the need, but until you have that plan identified, until you know what the specific ask is going to be, you've got to have those details, right? For the public, for them to understand. Are you asking me for X? Are you asking me for Y? What's going to be included? So we've got to work through the process to get those details nailed down. As we come together, as we build a plan for a levy or a bond, we get that picture, we go through the process to get all those steps completed. At the end of that phase, that's when the board takes action, right? You vote, decide to, yes, we want to refer this question to the voters. When that happens, things change for us as staff, right? Once that vote takes action, we are now under the world where we really need to respect this because you have formally taken an action and now we are absolutely in information mode. So this is a period in phase 3 where we are in intense public engagement. In our world as staff, we are absolutely working on information churning. We're trying to get information out to the community that is neutral, that is just the facts, that describes what the bond measure or the levy will do and has facts, has the it includes the cost, it includes the tax ramifications, it includes all of the elements of information to the public to know what will happen if the measure passes and what will happen if the measure does not pass. We're actually legally required to include that information as well in our materials. Now, the role of the board members at this time is really different than staff. Board members or community members at large or members of our task force or our community advisory committee, they're really anchored to be the leaders on advocacy. So while staff are limited and we can inform, it's really the elected official or the community members at large that are wanting to say, yes, please support this, that are the ones that are out in the community, that are advocating, asking for endorsements, putting letters to the editor into the newspaper, that are soliciting submissions into a voter's pamphlet statement. All those types of activities are things that we as staff cannot do, right? That has to fall on others out there. Generally, it is your elected officials that kind of take the lead there. And, you know, many times organizations will form, or not the organization, I apologize. Many times representatives from the community at large with elected officials' help will create a private advocacy group. And that's a very common practice that happens. And this is the type of activity that they would lead. So that's kind of the rundown. Takes us about 2 years plus to get through these steps, really centering staffer and information role. Board and others out there are in advocacy role. So with that, I kind of want to turn us over to this piece of paper now that we know our separate roles and responsibilities. And I want to anchor us to talk about, as we think to the future, you know, and we know that we have the potential of other money measures to ask for someday. What are some things that we want to reflect on? What went well? What did we learn? And what do we want to highlight as a success from this most recent levy ask that we had in May? And if you'll indulge me, I'm going to kick us off and then I'm going to ask all of you to go. So I have the easy one. We won. Yay. Okay, so we should celebrate that we won. That's tremendous. And I will say we won a particularly voter ask that's hard. It's hard to establish a new levy. Much easier to ask people to continue to support something or to support something that is retiring and replace it with something about the same spot. Much harder to ask for something new. And the second thing I want to highlight is we outperformed how we did in 2008. Now, Doug is going to be the first one to remind me, but Holly, there was a significant economic downturn in 2008, and that absolutely impacted voter outcomes. He's right. Absolutely did. But we should still acknowledge that success, that we did move the needle forward and we were able to build more support. So I just wanted to remind us that the 2008 bond measure passed with 50.97%, 50.97. And the May 2024 levy passed with 56.85%. So that's a pretty significant bump up in support for a THPRD measure. So wanted to highlight those as some food for thought of what went well. And I'm curious about your perspectives there.
I'd like to go first.
Say a few things. Some of the things that I felt that were done super well. Public information and community education. I think that there was a huge emphasis on getting out information from staff that was neutral and informative and really helpful for community members. Thinking about the half sheets and the mailers, I think that they were very educational, not too busy. Which is like always a hard thing. Like you want a voter to walk away with like big ideas, like they understand what the gist of it is, because it's the lifetime is I think everyone says this, like mailbox to the trash can, or recycling bin. So we have to like make sure that we can get some good information across to folks, and that's quick little moment that we have with them. I'm also really happy with the turnout of support that we got from our fellow community leaders. The voter pamphlet statements I felt like were very powerful. And it was great to see that the ones that we submitted, I don't think there were any in opposition, which was always nice. But I think, not to jump too far ahead, but I think that is also one of my things of like, how can we do that a little bit more strategically in the future? And that's more of a thing for us than something for staff to think about. But with the bond coming up, that is a good thing for us to be thinking about.
Lisa, talk.
Yeah, everything that Miles said for sure. And I think we can also point to just like our reputation, which goes back to little things and big things, from like a successful, a wonderful big truck day to, you know, all the little things that make the district what it is. And so we just have such a strong reputation that we got to call upon, and success. I loved the task force and how they informed us, and like we're really candid, and it also, in this case, it helped us create buy-in and champions who could look at the facts and say, gosh, this makes perfect sense. If I'm remembering correctly, Alfredo did several presentations, so I want to give kudos to Alfredo. And I think much like what Miles was saying, you know, I think we have barely scratched the surface on what we're capable of as a board in terms of like the role that there's things that only we can do. And so, and I acknowledge that I come from the school of door knocking. And so I was just so tense leading up to the election of like, we have not door knocked it. That is just my school of thought. It's not always right. And we won. And yeah, there are things that only we can do, which is fundraise, door knock. We can form a PAC. We can set up a group, you know, and we have peers that we can learn from. BSC does this, Metro does this. And I think we could have gone into this much more. I will just speak for myself. I would have been much more confident, I think, going into election night. And it's also just a wonderful opportunity to build relationships with our peers. And I mean, obviously I love door knocking. You got to talk to people. So I think it serves not only the end goal of passing a ballot measure, but also it serves 10 times over, from building relationships to individuals and hearing what matters to them, to, you know, informing our own policy decisions that we make every day, to also, you know, we did a shared canvas with Metro counselors, and we had the Washington County Auditor come, which was great. You know, we're just building relationships. That's our job. So I think there's a lot more we can do. And I say that with a huge asterisk of capacity of a volunteer board. So
I can jump in here real quick. So yeah, I had the unique perspective of being the board president at this time. So good and bad of it. I thought what went well was a really staff and board collectively, where there was a fundamental level of like roll up your sleeves, kind of high effort grassroots impact. So I thought that was great. What everyone was doing, seeing staff in the buildings, that strategy. I saw it with my own eyes waiting for my kids at gymnastics class and saw staff talking to patrons who, and got to overhear the feedback and things. I thought we did have a good 1-2 punch of informational presentation followed by, advocacy of varying impact. I hope it was good. But I thought we had a good bit where here's the facts. This is why you should really do it. And it was great. Felt right. To Felicia's point, past relational work of this board across the board translated into endorsements and public support, and that did not take a lot of lobbying. It was pretty easy to get things even from organizations. Maybe Beaverton Area Chamber of Commerce was not hard to get necessarily. Took a little extra effort maybe, but we had broad-based endorsements based on work everyone on this board has done. So that was great. Are we going into improvement or are we sliding there?
My intent was to start with Q1 and then go to Q2, but it's all good.
Okay, so I'm just answering Q1.
We were just on the positive, but it's okay.
I echo everything that everybody said. I want to call out our task force. I really enjoyed that. That made me feel better about moving forward with things because it wasn't just coming from us, but some other group had looked with a second pair of eyes and recognized that same thing. The community engagement was great. I feel like most of the people that I did talk to about it was like, oh yeah, I've seen it. I've already heard it. When I was passing out flyers at like the baseball games and stuff, they're like, we voted, or yeah, we got it. And so I thought that was great. And that's attributed to Holly and her team I know you were very stressed out during that time. So, but your message was getting there and getting to the right people. So those were the highlights and success, I think.
I'll add, I put signage as the first thing because you could not go around our town and not see signage every single where. And I think that started conversations organically. And that would parlay into what next phase, because it was a learning, it's just what did you learn? That was a learning opportunity. Again, the distinction between informed signage and advocacy signage. So I will reserve part 2 of that when we cross over to Q2. I think for me in general, there definitely was a learning curve throughout the entire thing. I had never participated in something like this. So I don't think that I could anticipate what more could be done because I was learning in real time, and why I'm very excited that we're doing this, because I think, again, afterwards, this is hindsight's 2020. You can then better prepare when you know how to anticipate what is needed. And I think starting so early gave us the opportunity to really get our minds adjusted and understanding what was to come and the reasons behind. And I would advocate for the task force there and say that I also echo those sentiments. Hearing from new and different voices telling us, hey, this is what the data is showing. We've done some community polls or whatnot, and we're tracking at this point, and we think we should come within this range. But also then teeing us up to say our work isn't done here yet. We see another deficit, and we would actually advocate to continue to look for the bond. So I think their perspectives and information shared back was a huge success. But some of those, again, are 1s and 2s, because I think we navigated, and thank you for all of the things. And then how can we plus those and make them even better? And that would be, I think, fall under Q2 of what can we do better next time.
Okay. I'm going to cheat and answer Q1 again, because I just want to say this. I want to particularly thank Maureen Foster. She is a super volunteer who showed up to one of our info sessions, and I will never forget her saying, I'm so hopping mad at THPRD. And she was so anti the concept of the levy, but when she listened to the presentation, she was not only in support of it, but she actually was our #1 volunteer signing up to work farmers markets and other events and do outreach. So for my little like community engagement heart, it just made it like grow like 10 times and gave me so much spirit. So much gratitude to Maureen for that. And then Connie Harris, I don't know if you remember Connie, but she showed up here and talked about the impact of the levy. She has become a dear friend. I have coffee with her once a month. I had coffee with her the day after the election. She was in tears for us in support. And I just think it just shows what a small town we still are and how, you can tell your story and make a great impact, and you can build bridges with people who are like, this sounds bananas. Oh, wait, not so bananas, so those were just awesome, heartwarming experiences for me on this journey. And on the signage, I want to say it was so fun to put signs in our parks for the first time. We had 850 signs out there on our properties, so that was awesome, and people saw them, and you are right, they were talked about a lot, and that was the first time we tried doing something like that. So Q2, you've already kind of got into these. What are some of the lessons learned? And this is really to build us for success, right? How can we use this experience and learn in the future? Thank you for what you've talked about, kind of the private advocacy. I would say from my perspective as staff, that is a gap that we want to look at. Just from the simple standpoint of, when people called us and said, I want a yard sign for my home, and we need a place to direct people. That has to be a private advocacy thing. We as staff can't direct them there, but what we can do is direct them to an elected official who can then direct them there. So, I think that's a gap we're going to want to think about in the future. And there are, from my prior experience, I've worked with all kinds of different elected officials who have been heavily involved, and there was a really involved private advocacy group to a more lighter touch. So it doesn't have to be a super heavy hard lift. It can be something that we scale, but I would recommend that the board consider that and think about that and kind of build some architecture around that for simple navigation purposes. And for some of what you talked about, you all have wonderful community connections. So getting those letters of support early, getting those endorsements, enticing people to want to support it, those are the tasks y'all have to take. And if you take them early and you do them in a coordinated way, that's wonderful, because staff can't do that. So that would be the one thing. And the other thing I would say, which won't be a problem in the future, and this might not have been as obvious to y'all, but I'll be honest, you could tell that this organization hadn't been through a money ask in 16 plus years, right? So Doug is kind of like the person who'd have the experience to be through the 2008 bond measure, but a lot of our staff, had retired. A lot of our staff had taken a different job. And so I think it was a real growth moment for the organization, because it is a very different project and a very different exercise than we typically do. And so I'm so looking forward to, if we do this again in the future, that we've got a more recent experience to pull from, because there's a lot of care and explanation and education that we need to take care of, not just externally, but internally, right? Like this levy that we passed in May, if it had failed, 300 people wouldn't have a job, right? So imagine the internal sort of angst and how people are feeling in the internal communications that we need to talk about and we need to be centered on, while we're also informing the public. So I'm grateful we've been through this experience, because I think that we are better positioned in the future to support our employees and support the community in future endeavors. So I'd love to hear your perspectives, if you have more to say about things we might want to think about doing differently.
I'd like to start just because, again, being in that role, because I do think, like, as a board president at that time, I was very flat-footed, and I think collectively, just putting it plainly, we were collectively flat-footed. We didn't have a playbook of what exactly to do. We were scrambling a lot, and goes to my plus of, like, very grassroots. We rolled up our sleeves and did great. But we were also kind of panicked when we did that. So my overarching question is how do we as a board, which, you know, 3 of us are in our 4th year or in at the end of our term. So there's potentially all new faces on this board. And this, like, how do we stay on target for something when we can't always, you know, like I'm thinking, it just wasn't on my radar fully to be like, oh, I need to be talking to PSD and TBFNR and see what they do and think about this pack. And I was like, what? We pay for it? You know, which was dumb, but it was like, I didn't know, you know, so how do we keep it in mind without, you know, I'm just trying to think how this collective knowledge moves down the stream with us, but it is the biggest question.
I was just gonna say, one thing that's exciting is that our friends at Washington County are doing a library levy and a public safety levy next year. So I think there's some opportunities to learn and engage. Theirs will be at a slightly different scale than ours, of course, but I think you're asking all the right questions.
Yeah. The final thing I'll just say in terms of what we can do looking forward is I mentioned this at the time. I just think anything we can do to start to story tell who and what that those tax dollars are supporting. I keep thinking about our folks who were working the ice storms and out. I mean, those were so impactful. I think community members seeing those in varying ways are like, you know, I just think it builds over time layered. It's not like, look at the great things. Also support that, you know, it's not a transactional thing. It's just a layered building that value of the faces and the people and the leaders and the folks. So it's not that argument of THPRD, you know, they're a rich, you know, board, you know, rich park and rec district. What do we need to support? I think it's just that what your investment is providing, I think, is great for us to just plant those seeds and watch them grow a little bit over the next few years. So that's one thing I would love to see, those feature-y type things as we can, which we may be able to pull up on and find use. So that's it.
Okay. Just because mostly Alfredo hit it on the nail for all the things that I wanted to talk about. I don't know if staff can create like a homework sheet for us that gets passed on of like things you can do, right? You don't, because again, you'll have boards later on in the future that want to do a lot. You'll have boards that don't want to do a lot. But if there's something that we can just pull from as a group and be like, oh, we are supposed to maybe go to Washco Dems meeting and some of us should be there to tell our story, or we should be, you know, talking to these people or these people. And we do need to create a pack if we want to, but we don't have to. But if that's like a homework sheet that can be given to the board president to work with, but that I don't want it to get all lost because a board went through one and the next board won't. So I'd love it that every board is prepared for this. And I'm sure that list will keep growing, you know, but if we can have that in our arsenal, that would be great if staff is allowed to do that. The other thing was that I had wrote down was time, because I felt like we were really rushed. And so I think with this bond, we'll be much more prepared. And I appreciate talking this early about it. So, because I think that'll change the story a little bit. And then Alfredo talked about storytelling, which I also agree. I think this time was a little bit different because this is our first operational levy. The bond, I think, as we get closer, it would be really nice to showcase like, your bonds paid for this, your bonds, like have those posters so that people know, because people are always like, I gave my money, where did it go? But not many people know. So if we show like our multi-course as we get closer to it and just be like, we paid for this, this is what we paid for. And then we have also the story of this is also what we're going to be doing and stuff, but that we've used your money well, and we're going to have many more things like this going forward. So.
Miles?
I'm just going to be echoing what I've already said, which is just, I think leveraging more of the relationships that we have in our community with other electeds.
Keeping it succinct. I like it, Miles. I will go quick and share. I think now that we know, and the way that you've spelled this out, 1, 2, and 3, if I were to oversimplify, I feel like when we vote and say yes to the dress, that's go time for us. And I don't think that was explicit for myself, that meant go time. And so I think where the crunch, from my experience, where I felt the rush the most was because we had the deadline for the voters pamphlet, right? So in my mind, there are certain dates that we will know going in that you're going to have to submit X, Y, or Z, we could work back from that and know. And that to me is like when you kick off having those conversations and working to get those endorsements. Caught me flat-footed for sure that that was even something that we would pursue, which might, again, learning curve for myself. And I will admit I was ill-informed, but I think if we're doing the work so far up front, whether that's a homework or whatnot, that as part of that timeline, it's like being very specific around the timing of when it means we can start engaging and we can go. I would be in favor of at least exploring and understanding what forming a PAC and something like that for funding would look like. I think, again, I was a person who was like, I want a yard sign, and not realizing that we could have other signs and things that would actually be explicit to say, vote yes for X, Y, or Z. And again, we just didn't have an opportunity to explore that further. My last piece to what you were talking about internally, I don't know if this is too far tactically down in the weeds, but staff augmentation is what came to my mind. I was very empathetic to you sharing with us at every meeting and watching your numbers go from 200 to 400 to 900 presentations, and thinking you are one person who's supported by an entire team, but just being mindful that burnout is real and that the other work needs to continue on at the same time. And so I might, in my day job, work with things that might come around every 4 years, like an Olympics, and how you pull people to participate in that thing, because it's additive to what is already the baseline expectation. So just very mindful of the staff's time away from other priorities. And if we know peaking that these 3 months are, maybe we need a couple of extra pairs of hands to support the workload.
If I could add a note as well, I think we've acknowledged this, but the understanding of what in this case Holly was able to manage, and the science behind the work, and I think for me, that's what I remember way back in our 2008 bond, is that we took the science seriously, but we relied very heavy on reputation, and it worked in the end, even though the downturn made it tight. And it was a landslide. We won by 1,600 votes entirely. But the reality is this time, almost 57% was outstanding. And there's still, we talked about it this evening, there's still things we can do better. And I think that's what's in front of us. And I appreciate, Barbie, your comments, because we all, several of us, took on other duties, stole them from Holly so that we could keep her focused. Still a major lift in the end. And I think the organization did just that. We pulled together. We probably could have pulled together 2 months earlier and been in better form. But you do what you can when it's live. And you pull it off, and I'm very proud of the district. I'm proud that one, the board via the task force was the best message of all, because it came from the public. This is the right thing to do.
Thank you, Doug. That was beautiful. I do want to say that this conversation is incredibly helpful to me, because I feel like I intrinsically understand the final 6 months are the mad dash, and I'm realizing, I might have not communicated this as effectively to y'all, that a lot of that stuff you're thinking about, it all happens at the end. It's like Thanksgiving dinner, right? Like you do all this cleaning and but so much of it is get done at the end. That's really what this stuff is. And Tia, I loved your suggestion about homework, and that is absolutely doable, because remember the restriction on advocacy. I mean, let me say this. It takes place when you refer the measure to. So there is nothing wrong with doing homework and rounding out these bullets here in a prescriptive way that says, at this time, these tasks need to be done. Now, I'm not going to go so far as to tell you who to call, right? But I can articulate the tasks that are typically done so that you do have a better play sheet in front of you to understand. And Alfredo, to your question of like, how is this done? What I typically have seen happen is the elected body sort of picks their wing person. And there is a wing person who is for the elected body. Okay, you take care of this, you take care of this, you take care of this. So it doesn't fall on any one of the 5 of you like an avalanche. It's distributed, it's coordinated, and it's understood. And again, those key tasks that you all are going to have are going to be at that same time period, right? And so if we're giving you that play sheet early, before that vote has happened, and you've got time to organize yourself and prepare, I think you will be much better served.
Thank you, Holly.
Great, thank you.
Kip?
All right. Shall I say we're adjourned?
Yes.
And quickly roll. Do we need to take a 5 or are we just going to roll with it?
That's up to you.
Okay, I think we just keep going.
I'm gonna go to the pizza.
Okay.
3.
Yeah, I'll do a 3.